I left the city, I've been browsing, treading water that they drowning. My head on a swivel, yeah. It's only really my surroundings.
Hello and welcome to episode 112 of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at Dynasty_DadFF. And guys, this is week 11. Week 11 is a crucial week, and we're coming at you with two podcasts. John and I earlier today did the Smash Accept Lawyers, the injury law firm, and talked to you about Cooper Kupp, talked about Dallas Goedert, Zach Ertz, and some fill-ins there. Tonight, we're doing a mailbag show. And I'm excited to break down some of these trades because week 11, guys, is just, it's make or break. This is a point where you can really start to make some moves towards either direction. And I think, if you're all in, we're going to talk about some trades with that. If you're moving towards redraft, or not redraft, but rebuilding and getting that way. But we want to really try to get you guys out of that middle range. We want to get you towards championships or closer to that 101. And to do that, mailbag show tonight. Welcome back to the show. It's been a while, but always a pleasure. Adam Armour, how you doing tonight?
Doing good, Dad. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's that time of year where I think people are starting to see if they're if they're going to be trying to go for the ship or trying to get out, and looking forward to have the conversation.
Yeah, and congratulations. You were sharing before we got on here, you are in the Scott Fish playoffs. I know you've been on a couple times here, and the guy knows his stuff. He's super active in the Patreon, and just being in that playoff there even speaks to that even more. So congratulations.
Thanks, brother.
Mung, welcome back. It's like, it's that time, right? I was talking with John today when I was saying it, and it's like, this is that fun time of year where this is the last chance you have to buy or sell Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans. We got a bye week in week 11, and I'm still just trying to get used to so many good players being on bye. You have Jacksonville, you have Tampa Bay, you have Miami. There are some real ballers here where you can make some difference. You can make some headway because a lot of teams might be sitting there at 5-5 and have Tyreek Hill, and you might be able to jump in there and make some moves. So I'm excited to chop it up with you tonight and really get that going. How you doing?
Pretty good. Excited to talk about some trades. And as you said, it is getting down to crunch time. So time to make some of those priority moves, especially with the landscape shifting quite a bit again this past weekend, unfortunately, due to injuries. Tight ends super thin with Goddard down now.
Yeah.
Cooper Kupp was one of the few reliable double-digit wide receivers every single week. So definitely a lot to talk about.
The two tight end league that I'm in, I lost Goddard and Ertz, and I'm just trying to find two more tight ends in this landscape is a wreck, because you have so many teams that are vying for playoffs. But the first set of trades, and somebody that we've been talking about a lot on the podcast, Mung and I absolutely, and I know John does too, or that Adam does too, like Jameson Williams. He hasn't played this year, but he's someone that we were super high on in rookie drafts. And I saw a thread out there talking about all the different trades potentially to pick him up, and I wanted to cover some of them with you guys because I know you guys are really high on Jameson Williams and a couple of the trades that I saw. So the first one, and I believe this is Khalil Herbert, who is on IR now, so that might change things a little bit, but we're looking at side one is Khalil Herbert, Jameson Williams, and a 23 first. Side two, Kittle, T. Higgins, and a 23 second. Now, I'm super high on Jameson Williams, just like you guys, but break this trade down a little bit for me. We'll start. Adam, you haven't been on for a while, so I'll let you start this thing out. And by the way, this was sent in from @JohnPap2. Just a little
give
shout
that to me one more time, Dad.
We're looking at Khalil Herbert, Jameson Williams, a 23 first and a 23 third, or T. Higgins, Kittle, and a 23 second.
Ooh, yeah. I think that's a pretty good trade, but I lean toward the Jameson side just because of mainly because a lot of this other side. I'm a big Kittle sell. I know we were talking about that together the other day and on the Patreon, but I personally would go the Jameson side. I think he just talking about the talent. They traded up to get him. So from a insulation perspective, draft capital, we'll get to that in some of the other trades as well that we're going to come up to. But I think as a talent, he's an ascending player. I get it though with the other side though, certainly trying to, if you're in an all in, but from a value, I personally like the JMO side.
Yeah, I think like always, I mean, and this was, it's where's that 23 first? John and the Patreon guys did a mock draft today, and, anything up to they got Keyshawn Boutte at 110. I mean, that's like the cutoff for me, but this pick is if it's in that mid-range or if it's earlier, I'm very interested to see where you're at with this one too, because Kittle's getting into an interesting situation. I love T. Higgins. What do you think about this potential trade?
Well, like you said, it depends a little bit on where that first ends up. But in general, I would agree with Adam that I lean towards that Jameson Williams side. Certainly, if you're contending, I could understand pushing all in with Higgins. But Kittle's been inconsistent with Garoppolo, as he always has. And I do think that Higgins will, be slightly less consistent week to week with Jamar Williams' return on the horizon. And like you guys, I am pretty high on Jameson Williams once he's back healthy as well. So I'd lean the Williams side, and especially if you're rebuilding, I think that's a great value.
I, in this particular trade, think that the second feels like it doesn't necessarily need to be in there. Like if I'm rebuilding, yeah, I'm pushing Kittle out. Higgins is kind of a guy that if I'm rebuilding, I mean, I have no problem with T. Higgins as my wide receiver too. You know what I mean? And this is where, to me, would I trade? If that 23 first is very good, I'm definitely there. If it's a late first, I still think Jameson Williams in a late first is about the same as T. Higgins, but I do prefer Kittle in a second over Herbert in a third, and that's kind of the interesting part where I'm at there. Again, when you guys send in these trades, make sure you guys tell us where they're located. The next one here, and this was one of my guys in the offseason. I mean, I loved Elijah Moore, but he said he traded Elijah Moore in a mid-23 second for Jameson Williams. I mean, first off, Adam, I know you're huge. You were huge on Elijah Moore, just like I was. He's finally moving back into the slot after the bye week, but Zach Wilson has killed Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore is an afterthought, and it breaks my heart to even say that. And in this particular situation, I think even though that 23-second class is juicy, I'm going for Jameson Williams here as well, just for that sheer upside, because Elijah Moore is leaving a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, we'll take the L on Elijah, right? I mean, even I thought he was actually going to do better when Flacco was in, but even then, Wilson was taking a lot of those targets. So It just doesn't look good regardless of quarterback situation. And I don't think, with how much draft capital they have with Wilson, that they're going to move on from him, especially because they're in the playoff, run that they're looking like. So I just think Elijah's going to, his value insulation's gone. So, and then a second, 23, even, I think it was a mid-second on that particular deal. That's a dart throw. If it's early second, then I would consider it. But for me, it's a smash.
And I think the crazy thing here, Adam, is, I believe in Elijah Moore, the talent. I mean, we saw a guy that was putting up some monster numbers last year. I mean, he was a wide receiver too when he was on the football field. If you're in a rebuilding team, what would you pay for Elijah Moore? Because I feel like if you look at a contending team, you might be able to offload something, and get a potential star if he moves on into a different situation, if things start to click. Because last year, he looked fantastic.
Yeah, I think, a late second would be an easy buy for me. Because everybody's, especially rebuilds, right, trying to acquire seconds. So I think you could probably get a little bit extra, but that's kind of the range. Early third, late second. If you're rebuilding, you got an early third for him. I think some teams would probably let him go because they want to give up on him. So I think that's the range I'm comfortable buying him in. But I'm definitely not overpaying for him because again, there's not much insulation there.
Yeah, and this trade again sent in from @JeffSperano. Mung, I mean. Yeah, again, we're hitting on your boy here, Jameson Williams, but is this a smash accept?
Absolutely. I would need significantly more than just a second-round rookie pick on top of Moore to sell Jameson Williams.
Now, here's where it gets interesting. So, sent in from Luck of the Irish @O'Hearn22. Got him traded straight up for a late 23 first. Now, I said when they did their mock today, Keyshawn Boutte went at 110. There were 2 other wide receivers taken in that area that I'm going to look up here. But what area are you comfortable in among trading for? If you're trading a 23 first, I've been advocating hard for giving a 24 first in something small. But if you're trading one of those coveted 23 firsts, where is that cutoff with you when it comes to Jameson Williams? I mean, we have to try to think of an area where, what is that going to be? In the draft today, Keyshawn Boutte, Josh Downs, and Quentin Johnson were all in that area. All 3 of them project to be, absolute ballers as well.
I would say Williams is in that range. So in that 6 to 8 or so range, if we're talking super flex, including those 2 quarterbacks in front of him.
Okay. Oh, wow. I'm like, I can't put him above Smith and Jigba or Addison, but I mean, I feel like from what we've seen, and I think it's just out of sight, out of mind. And the reason we're talking about Jameson Williams is a lot of these teams that have them, they might have drafted at 1-9, 1-10. They're a borderline playoff team. And I think you guys can go out there and take some shots at him. Adam, in that 23 class, I mean, if you're sitting there at 110 and you are not a contender, would you rather have the 110 that could potentially, increase in value because we know about how things work in the draft? Or are you taking your shot on a guy like Jameson Williams, who we've seen what he could do, in college? We just haven't seen it in the pros yet.
Yeah, I think that's about right around that 1-9, 110. And the kind of the way I look at it is this: if because I know Mung's touched on this in past episodes, but it's important to consider because everybody's different risk aversion needs to be taken into account. I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if you are risk averse, you take the pick, right? Because you have guaranteed upside in that range, and it's a great class. But if you want to roll the dice, and I agree with Mung, the talent and I think the upside in the short term, if he hits the field, it would not shock me if he rises up ranks. And you see Amon St. Brown, who had barely any draft capital, blew up the charts because of his last 6 weeks, right? So think of that, but with the amount of draft capital they paid for JMO to move up and get him. So you're talking about he can move up to the top 5 if he has a similar year-end season as Amon St. Brown. So so for me, if you are risk averse, I'd take the pick. But if you like to take risk for short-term upside, then JMO for me around that 9-10 range.
I love it, and that's why we love Dynasty so much. Is like it just depends on how you go. I've been trying to shop Jameson Williams in one of my leagues where I'm 19-1 in double leagues. I lost the median 1 week, and I'm trying to shop Jameson Williams, and the best I can get is what this next trade is, and there's no way I'm trading it. But it's at Y_IT sent James Robinson for Jameson Williams. I am taking Jameson Williams over James Robinson any day of the week. I mean, that is an absolute smash accept, and I'm struggling to find an area where I can leverage that same. If that was the 110 on the flip side, I think I could get something a little bit different. And I know that's out of sight, out of mind for a lot of owners. Jameson Williams is definitely a guy to go out there and target. Do those insulated trades like we've been talking about. I mean, right now, since we're talking about it, since we were talking about Cooper Kupp, I literally just got a deal done where I got DeAndre Hopkins and a 24 first for Cooper Kupp. Mung, if you are a Cooper Kupp owner, and you're in that spot where, let's say you were 5-5, and now all of a sudden you're like, you know what, I'm not going to make it. What would you need on top of Jameson Williams? Like, you're the Kupp owner, you're going to get Jameson Williams. Can you get a late 23 first? Can you get a 24 first? I think this is a type of move where it's like, we got to look at Cooper Kupp. He's going to be 30 years old next year, and we have a spot here where you can potentially get a Jameson Williams and a decent amount of plus.
Yeah, it really depends because I think Kupp could still hold quite a bit of value, especially with some contenders, willing to roll the dice on the fact that he has a shot at least to be back for the fantasy playoffs, right? We know he's out for at least 4 weeks, but there's a slim chance that he could be back, by week 16 or 17. In general, I think I'm going to have them ranked very closely in my next Dynasty rankings update. I think I have Kupp 2 spots ahead of Williams as of right now. So if you can get Williams in a second, I would definitely consider that. You might be able to get Williams plus a first, depending on the league.
And they've moved, I was looking at Dynasty Trade Calculator, and it's moved Cooper Kupp down to like wide receiver 9 status. I feel like we're only going to move further. They say the 4 to 6 range and surgery there, but it's like, I think what's the point of rushing him back? I think we've seen the last of Cooper Kupp for this particular season, and that's why, I'm potentially advocating going out there and making moves and trying to get guys to pick up in that situation. Another guy that we've really pushed on the podcast lately, and that was buying Deshaun Watson. I have a trade sent in here from @FF Dynasty Polls, 12-team Superflex. Would you rather have Joe Mixon in a late 23 first or Deshaun Watson? We'll start with you, Mung. I mean, I have Deshaun Watson in Smash 1, and I'm trying to get offers, and I'm getting quite a few. Is Mixon in a 23 first? Is that fair? Is that adequate value for you? Or where? And again, remind everybody how high you have Deshaun Watson, because I did a poll recently that I want to share afterwards, but I want to hear from you first.
Sure. I do think that's close to fair value, because Mixon probably isn't going to repeat, that kind of touchdown performance that he had prior to the bye, but he should be a solid, back end RB1, going to have some big games here and there with the Bengals offense looking better, especially with Chase coming back. But that said, yeah, I would still lean Watson in this deal. We're seeing more and more with Russell Wilson underperforming, Stafford underperforming, Brady and Rodgers both struggling and probably nearing the ends of their careers, that even in one quarterback leagues, not to mention Superflex, there's going to be a big divide between the haves and have-nots at the quarterback position. And
it's huge.
Right now, I would say Mahomes, Allen, Jackson, Hurts, Herbert, Murray, Fields, Tua, Burrow, and Watson are probably, the most secure top 10. Maybe Dak, if you want to put him in there as well. But, that's not even 12, right? So I think to get a legitimate, strong QB1 option to anchor your roster for the foreseeable future, I would still take Watson over Mixon in the late first.
Yeah, and Adam, this is a year where, like, last year you would have been like, well, I can get Mixon, and you know what? With that 23 first, I could get Tom Brady, But now you're looking at it as like, there are not very many quarterbacks who I can go out there and say, you know what? I'm pursuing that guy with the 23 first, because it's like there's that top 10 and they cost you 2 firsts. And then there's like nothing you want to pay a 23 first for. Maybe you could argue that you're on a contender and you want Kirk Cousins and Joe Mixon in this situation. But are you taking the 23 first? Because we're assuming it's a late 23 first, so he's a contender. So you going Watson or you going 23 first and Mixon?
Yeah, Watson for me also. Kind of just to clarify, from a strategic standpoint, kind of exactly what Mung said, but just looked at it a different way. If you ever can give up what is likely in the late 23 first, is not going to be an elite QB option, likely,
no.
Unless it's a home draft and it's weird. But in most drafts, you're not going to get elite quarterback. So if you can get an elite quarterback for, let's just say non-top 5 at their positions, I'm going to go the top. He's got that type of upside. To Mung's point, he's definitely locked in top 10, but he has the top 5 upside, and he's still young.
Yeah.
So you have to lock that in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think the reason I wanted to transition that is the next thing is I put a tweet out yesterday. It's week 11 players that I value over the 101. Like, if you are in a situation right now where you are 102, 103, and if you shave off some points and you can put yourself into that 101 range, I mean, Bijan is literally in an area where he's almost a first-round pick right now. But, I mean, I had Allen, Mahomes, Hurts, Jefferson, Lamar, Burrow, Herbert, Chase, and then I've moved Fields, Kyler, and Watson into that area too. And real close is A.J. Brown, Tua, Saquon, JT. I mean, they're all in that area. But I still think Watson, as soon as he steps on that field, as soon as he has one good game, he is back into that first-round draft capital. And I think, not every league is like that. I mean, I've been shopping him in one league. I have an embarrassment of riches. I have Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Deshaun Watson. And I've floated Deshaun Watson out there looking for a running back, and the best offer I got is Josh Jacobs. And I'm like, I'm not taking that. It's a super flex league. I know it's 10 team, but there are leagues where you can buy Watson because people still just don't believe. And I think it is just foolish to not go out there and at least try, because we're looking at we're 2 weeks away here. go out there and try to get Deshaun Watson. The next trade sent in from at Charles Bella. This is another guy that last week, Mung, we absolutely nailed the guys to buy last week. We said it was your last chance to buy Fields. We said Elijah. You said Elijah Mitchell. I said Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk is now the wide receiver 7. And Adam, I've tried to trade him in Smash 3 to everyone, and no one's given me anything. But I'm looking at a trade here where, we got a guy said he is a team that is rebuilding. On a rebuilding team, would you rather have a late 23 second and a mid 24 third or Christian Kirk? Adam, Christian Kirk is a wide receiver. He's the wide receiver 7 on the season. It's hard to deny that from a 25-year-old for a late third or a mid 24 third and a late 23 second. I just can't get behind it.
Yeah, I agree. It's for me, it's Kirk all the way, even in a rebuild. Because you're talking about, dart throws, right? So if I can get, if he, likely he's going to be a wide receiver too, right? But he's on an ascending offense. He's still young on his first contract. So I think you got to go for what I think is more secure of an upside and more known quantity.
Yeah, Mung, similar type question. What realistically, if Christian Kirk was drafted in the first round and he was 6'3", we'd be starting to put him in that. I have no doubt that people would rank him above Amon-Ra St. Brown. They would have him in that top 10 wide receiver. But because of his size, because of his draft capital, because of things where people aren't looking at it as a sexy play, it is the type of play that can win you your dynasty league because he's that wide receiver 3 putting up wide receiver 1 numbers. And to me, it's 2:23 seconds is the only way that you're giving up a guy like Christian Kirk.
Yeah, he kind of falls into that same mold where the production just never matches up to the value, right? We talked about similar guys like Jacoby Myers, who has that consistent PPR production, but you can still get him for pretty cheap. And Kirk is the same way because it does sound like Doug Peterson realized that this Jacksonville offense works best when it kind of funnels through Kirk. And it sounds like rest of season, they're going to continue to feed Christian Kirk, especially with their defense still giving up a lot of points. It's worth bearing in mind that Calvin Ridley coming back next year will knock Kirk's value. So perhaps you do want to sell if you're rebuilding. But even so, I would want more than just a late second because whether it's that team or a different team, at some point, if he continues putting up this kind of numbers, this kind of production, then his value is going to rise. And perhaps, right before the fantasy playoffs, you might be able to get a first-round rookie pick for him.
That's what I've been holding on to forever. But, right now, he is the dynasty wide receiver 30, according to Dynasty Trade Calculator. He's right in that same area as Juju Smith-Schuster, DeAndre Hopkins, Brandon Ayuk, Treylon Burks. And, I think, again, if he has a different profile, if he sounds like a sexier name, he's a bigger guy, I think, you get yourself into a situation where he could be going up there. But I think he's that guy that if you lost Cooper Kupp, I'm going out there and I'm trying to buy Christian Kirk cheap because you're going to get borderline wide receiver 1 production at a fraction of the cost, and Adam, is there, we talked about it with John, but who's that guy you're going out there and buying? You lost Cooper Kupp. You probably, let's say you don't have your first round pick left. Who would you go out there and make a play for?
Yeah, Kirk's a good one. I think Hopkins is still relatively low value. A lot of people are worried about his age, and I know we've talked about it in the past, but just his style of play. He's a tactician of route running, right? So that type of wide receiver still has longer than average longevity. Now he's got zero value insulation, so this is definitely not a upside play from a value standpoint. But if you're contending and you need the points, I think Hopkins would be one I'm going after.
Yeah, that was my number 1 today. I said Hopkins, and it looks like Keenan Allen comes back this week, and I think you can get Keenan Allen for slightly more than a second. You don't have to pay a first anymore, and I think, if man, Adam, after you hosed me on that trade, I traded you Jefferson for Najee and Keenan Allen, and he's just been downhill ever since. That's been my curse. I have Keenan everywhere. I think he's gonna step up down that stretch run. Mung, who's another stopgap for you? Like I think everyone is out there trying to say, well, I'm trading Cooper Kupp for someone in this range. But the other mentality is, who can we get to be a stopgap? Who's somebody that can come in there and perform to the ability at a fraction of the cost?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you're going to have to pay up, right? But if you're looking for injury discounts, perhaps Mike Williams, you mentioned Keenan Allen, but Williams should be back at some point. Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones, again, same as getting that Watson bump in the near future. We talked about Marquise Brown a little bit already. Terry McLaurin's value is rising because Heineke is targeting him much more heavily than Carson Wentz ever was. And then, a lot of people are still hesitant on Kadarius Toney. So if you're willing to roll the dice, if he can emerge as that lead option in Kansas City, he certainly looked good after Juju left that game with that concussion. So a lot of potential risk-reward wide receivers that you can get for a slightly lower cost right now.
And that's why I love talking to both of you guys, because you guys just hit it from both angles. You know what I mean? Like, you hit it with some upside guys. Adam hit it with some high floor, lower type ceiling guys that are going to go out there and get it done. And I think there's no right or wrong way to go about it if you're going to try to move Kupp. But hit us up on some of these trades. Like, don't just sell him for nothing. There's a lot of potential out there. A trade sent in from, I'm going to try to say this the right way, me, Juju, Kayla. He sent, and then his name's Mike. He has a trade here, and he really wanted us to go over. It's a 10-team Superflex tight end premium. He is giving Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Dalton Schultz for Patrick Mahomes in a second. Now, he was showing me that the calculator has this pretty close here. Adam, let's start out with you. I mean, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, they're in a tier of their own at this point. Dak Prescott is probably tier 3 when it comes to quarterbacks and just lost a little bit of that appeal. But CeeDee Lamb has really emerged as that top 5 dynasty wide receiver. So talk to me a little bit about this trade. I'm assuming he's a contender and has some extra pieces on there. He just said that the second's going to be a mid. So it's Mahomes in a second that's mid, or Dak, CeeDee Lamb, and Schultz, which is got to be a Dallas fan because you're just totally stacking.
Yeah, right. I just a reminder, the economy between looking at how many teams are in the league. So this is a 10-teamer, but just to remind our listeners that, when you're going from 8 to 10, 12 to 14 plus, that changes the dynamic very heavily in trades. So props to Mike for letting us know. And also when you're sending your trades, definitely tell us, again, details like this. So because it's a 10-team super flex tight end premium, it definitely favors your, 8 and 10 teamers are going to favor your upside a lot more than your 12 to 16s. Right. So for me, I'm definitely going the Mahomes side because, to get a top 2 at the position of high demand, I think it's well worth it. Now, one other side, because I like to look at things from a risk adjusted basis, knowing me. One other thing that one argument might be for a common trade like this, normally when you're going 2 for 1, 3 for 1, is you're putting a lot of your eggs in one basket, right? You're trading 3 players for 1 player. So one thing in this particular one I wanted to note is you mentioned, Dad, is that it's all Cowboys players. So I'd argue, to someone that is pro Dak, Lamb, Schultz in this particular case, that because they're all on one team, you actually have equivalent amount of concentration risk, even though there is more players on the other deal. They're all on the same team, so they're very highly correlated as a result. So just wanted to add that small Pete, but yeah, I'm definitely on the Mahomes side of this.
Yeah, Mung, I mean, we both kind of like Dak. I've been huge on Lamb. So there's definitely some pop on that, on that other side. Is this enough for you to, give up for Patrick Mahomes? I mean, which side do you like here? The fact that I think Adam hit it when it's 10 team. If this is 14 team, I'm not even batting an eye. I'm taking the package because I feel like there you're getting one that, cheapens the pick, and 2, you're looking at, a wide receiver 1 and a QB 1. But in the 10 team, Mung, which way would you be leaning?
I think it's a very fair deal for both sides. I would assume that, one team is contending, getting all the Cowboys players who are looking good, and the other player is getting Mahomes for a rebuild potentially and a second round rookie pick in a 10-team super flex. That's still going to have quite a bit of value, especially if it ends up being earlier. So, in general, I see this as a very fair deal. Again, Mahomes is in that elite tier, but Prescott should be fine rest of season. And we've seen that the Cowboys have become a very siloed offense where targets are very much concentrated to Lamb and Schultz. So both of those guys, especially in a tight end premium, should be strong options for a contending team.
Great analysis. I love it. This one sent in from Dustin. That's at 521 Juice. He is in the Patreon. He is in Smash 6, I believe. Adam, is he in the one with you? I don't know. There's so many of them. I'm blurring together. A lot of guys have been asking, yo, Dad, how do I get in Smash? Except we're not doing any more. The Patreon has really just blown up so much that I'm turning people away. But when we get to the Discord, in the off season, we will be doing that. We will be doing another Smash 8 in March, and we're going to do some more startups. Guys, if you want to be in leagues with just absolute crazy amounts of trades, that's the way to do it, and you get to play with us. But this particular trade is a Dynasty Superflex win now mode, he said. Chris Olave and DeAndre Hopkins or Jamar Chase. This one, at almost 1,400 votes on my fantasy league, is a dead 50-50 mung. On one side, you got Jamar Chase. The other side, you have the upside of Olave and the insulation of DeAndre Hopkins. Man, this is a tough one. But he says he's win now.
It comes down to your team record and your roster, right? Because if you're locked into a playoff spot, potentially even a top 2 spot for a first round bye, then give me Chase here. If you need the depth, if you start like 3 to 4 flex spots, if it's a deeper format, then I think it's fine if you take Olave and Hopkins here. I would just lean Chase in a vacuum because of the fact that, one, Murray's hurt right now, although it didn't seem like it mattered even with Colt McCoy slinging. But two, with Marquise Brown coming back, I do think the targets are going to be split a little bit more evenly between Brown, Hopkins, and a little bit of Moore, too, with Ertz out.
Adam, I got to tell you how I responded to this, and I was the only person. There's like 7 analysts that responded to this. I'm the only one that said, I'm keeping Chase because I will give up my 24 first for DeAndre Hopkins because I can recoup that. You will not, and I like Chris Olave, but he's not Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase is in a tier with Justin Jefferson, and that is it. And I mean, from Smash 3, I've had countless offers for Jamar Chase, and I just have a hard time. I just have a really hard time dealing him because I don't feel like Olave is in that same breath.
No, I agree. I mean, it's a close trade. I think it goes. Mung laid it out pretty well in that. Hey, if you're going for it and you have a deeper roster, I'm assuming 12 plus team leagues on that as well. Is that I see it, but I mean, I agree from a pure value. I'm definitely going Chase more for the reason not only that he's elite talent, but once he's back and healthy, you are not going to be able to get him. So if you can, this is the buy window. Go ahead, Dad.
I like it. Nope, perfect. This is one sent in from Stuck in the 90s. And this trade, I put out a tweet last week, my 10 sells before week 10. DeAndre Swift was at the absolute top of that list. And you're going to be shocked by some of these results, but we have DeAndre Swift or Chris Godwin in Dynasty. Mung, you're a little bit higher on, you've been a little bit lower on Swift and a little bit higher on Godwin. How close is this trade for you?
I don't think it's crazy. But that being said, I would still take Swift over Godwin, both due to age and then also, we don't know if Brady's going to be done after this year, or at least in Tampa. And I do think that Swift's involvement is going to continue ramping back up because I think they're still easing him back in from those injuries earlier in the season. So, yeah, I'm still taking Swift here.
Adam, the crazy thing to me is this came up 75-25 in favor of Godwin. People are really trying to get out on DeAndre Swift, and I think the talent is still there. I mean, to me, and I know you like Godwin as well, would you trade Godwin straight up for Swift?
I would. Yeah, and this is a good Swift buying window for the patient
Right.
fantasy owner, right? That's the main thing and that's, certainly I get it if you are, this is a good one. If you're running back loaded and you lost Cup. Now I wouldn't necessarily try to sell Swift, but that's a kind of a deal and situation I could see this going in. But overall, if we're talking about what is their values going to be next season, Godwin's likely, certainly there's possibility they get another quarterback, but I to your point, I think there's much more value insulation on the Swift side, and it's a good buy low. So I think for me, it's pretty easily Swift.
All right, another fun one here from Motown Matt. Jamison Williams and a mid-23 first or CD Lamb. It's a 10-team league, Superflex PPR dynasty, and he's pushing the chips in to try to win. Mung, is this one of those trades where you're trading Jamison in a mid to late? It's a mid to late, so I always think that's like 108. So Jamison Williams in 108 or CD Lamb. And I know, you're pushing the chips in. Is this a situation where he should be trying to trade that mid-23 first for a different wide receiver? Or is this one where, this could potentially bite him when we look at Jamison Williams and that 23 first and what they accumulate to be worth?
Yeah, for me, the gap is slightly less than a first. That's how high I am on Williams. So at the very least, if you're confident you're a strong contender, and you like Lamb a lot, I would at least try to get a second back on top.
He also has a second one sitting here, Adam, and I want you to go over this one too. It looks like the same league, and he's kind of gauging where he should be at. Cooper Kupp in a late 23 first for Lamb. So let's talk about the two. Would you rather have Jamison Williams in a mid to late 23 first or Cooper Kupp and a 23 first that's guaranteed to be late?
Yeah, I like the first one better. I would rather have Jamison Williams, similar to Mung, very high on him. And there's risk of Cup, right? And he is a good acquisition for like a 1 year punt is perfect with Cup, but there is risks, right? With his injury, he will be turning 30. So whereas the other, the Jamison trade, I would rather lock in, a pretty solid player, even if it's, the 8th, 9th pick, which is mid to late, and someone with Jamison's upside. I just love the value insulation and the upside better.
Yeah, I think, I'm glad you said about that year one punt because I'm doing 3 of them in the Smash Leagues. I have made offers for Cooper Kupp in every single one because the nice part about that, and you're in a similar boat as well, where you have 6, 7, plus 23 first in a class where, John did that exercise today and there were 5 running backs going in the first round. If you throw one of them late 23 first, you might be able to get Cooper Kupp. And now all of a sudden you go for a situation where you have all these upside wide receivers and quarterbacks like you and I play it. You get these young running backs and then Cooper Kupp really just puts you over the top that could, increase in value a little bit into next season.
Yeah, he's a perfect 1 year punt because, if you're full rebuild, because if you're needing 2 years, then you're talking 31, right? And who knows in 2 years what that offense looks like. It would not, not that I dislike Matthew Stafford, but with his age, right? I mean, it's completely possible they could blow that team up, right, in 2 years. So it's there's a lot of variance there, but it is for next year. You're not going to get a better buying opportunity than Kupp right now in the next few weeks while he's injured.
100%. I like that. Mung, anything to add to that? I mean, like we did a whole podcast on Cooper Kupp, but we'd be remiss not to have your input there as well about, your initial reactions of how to win in Dynasty based off the news of Cooper Kupp.
It's so tough because it's very situationally dependent, right? Again, he could be a title winner for you if he comes back somehow in week 16 or 17. If not, I think the physical skills are still fine where he's still going to be a strong producer even into his earlier 30s. But again, that's always a risky call, especially if, like you said, the Rams, who have, traded away so many picks in the last few years, really just aren't able to improve the offensive line much. But, that at the same time, that offense is so dependent and funneled through Kupp already. So really it's risk reward. And again, it depends very much on your roster and what your goal is for the rest of the season and for 2023.
Great assessment. I love it. This one sent in from Todd Jones. That's at Jonesy1876. Twitter has this one at 50.9 to 49.1. We're looking at a 10-team Superflex 6-point passing touchdown. Adam, if I come to you today, are you taking Lamar Jackson or are you taking Joe Burrow?
Oof. I think for me, I'm going Burrow, but I mean, it is splitting hairs. The reason why I lean Burrow is just his situational. His situation is more known. Now he could not be re-signed, but I think they would have riots in Cincinnati if they didn't extend him next offseason. But there's I think the probabilities of Lamar not being in his current team, the Ravens, is higher than the probability of Burrow. But the question is that offset with Lamar's legs, right? So I think that's the give and take. So for me, I get both sides, but I'd lean Burrow personally.
Right now, you're looking at Joe Burrow's QB5. Lamar Jackson is QB6. I'm pretty sure which side you're going to go on, Mung. But I mean, if you're looking at this particular trade, is there a scenario? I know you're Team Lamar, but is there a scenario where you're like, I would rather have Joe Burrow than Lamar Jackson?
Yeah, I don't think it's crazy at all in a 6-point passing touchdown format. To be fair, I don't play in any 6-point passing touchdown leagues, so take my opinion on here with a grain of salt. So
Smash One is, man.
Right, but outside of that, and that's 14 team too, which is weird.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I'm not as familiar with that format, but I think if you prefer Burrow, I don't think it's crazy. I lean Lamar slightly because his passing numbers have been suppressed a little bit this year with Bateman hurt and Andrews iffy as well. So I do think that he's going to throw more too, and especially if they ever get rid of Greg Roman.
Absolutely. Looking for another great trade here. Guys are saying, would you take rest of season? I want you to talk about both these players because this is just a poll here where it's Rachaad White and Isaiah Pacheco. Both of these guys this week really established themselves. I mean, in the podcast last week, we said go out there and buy Rachaad White because Leonard Fournette has been struggling. But if he goes down to injury, now it looks like Fournette is going to be back for week 12. It looks like both of these guys looked fantastic in week 10, Adam. I mean, talk to me about one, and then I'll let Mung talk about the other. But I think both of these guys have some serious upside down the stretch.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Both have, especially in the near term, have huge upside. I definitely like White better personally, and it's just more draft capital situation, right? Pacheco, I'll let Mung speak to more specifics, but just in comparisons, I just think, White has a lot more value and value insulation. Meaning if even if he has an injury, right, or something happens, I think he's still going to come back. Whereas Pacheco, because of his lower draft status, and I think there's less safety within his value. So that's why I go with White.
Adam, what would you pay for Rachaad White right now?
I think I would pay an early second for him.
Okay. I was talking about that with John today. I said I thought I was ballsy saying I would pay a 24 first, given that I think he takes over here and really has a chance to ascend in value if I knew it was late. And I see where you're saying with that 23 second. Mung, I saw you put a tweet out there today about Pacheco, and it was like we were talking about it was going to take a Clyde Edwards-Helaire injury for Pacheco to take over, but he is dominating the touches in this backfield.
Yeah, and I have them ranked pretty close. I have Pacheco a little bit higher for two reasons. One, I think as a pure talent, Pacheco is a better runner. He certainly still has issues, and we'll see if he ever gets more involved as a receiver, because obviously that matters a lot in PPR formats, which most leagues play in at this point. But the second reason is I'd actually go the opposite in terms of less risk. For me, I don't see either as an elite talent necessarily. But I don't know that White is going to ever take over fully in Tampa with Fournette there, even if he does assert himself in that lead role. And two, I just don't know what that offense looks like next season if Brady is gone, whereas we know that Mahomes is sticking around in Kansas City for the foreseeable future.
I love it. I mean, I'm liking both of those guys. One thing that my DMs have been flooded about the tight end position. Dallas Goedert is out. You got to look at Zach Ertz is done for the year. Goddard is at least going to miss 4 weeks and get some time missing in there. The guys that I've been suggesting going out there and buying is Juwan Johnson. It's Cole Kmet. It's even there's some guys there that you're gonna have to. It's a position that was already Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce and then everybody else. Mung, who's a guy that you're just telling people to go out there and trade for as a stopgap? I mean, there's been Evan Ingram has had some nice weeks, but he's been down the last couple. Gerald Everett has had some nice weeks. There's guys that are out there that are borderline starting to break through, like Otten. I mean, and Dulcich. I mean, there's so many guys right now that are just, it seems like a crapshoot. If people are really trying to put themselves into a position to win, who are they going out there to get?
So I have a few names depending on how much you want to pay, I guess.
No, that's exactly why we're doing this is like, check the budget, who we going to buy and how much are they going to cost? Because I just, every couple hours I'm getting a DM of, Dad, I need a tight end and I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, if you're willing to pay like a mid-second, maybe early second, you can probably get a guy like Njoku, who we've talked about before, again, with Watson coming back soon. Pat Freiermuth, who's getting a lot more slot snaps now that Chase Claypool has been traded away. And if you want somebody really cheap, I mean, he wasn't even really being talked about prior to his injury, but Daniel Bellinger, the Giants really just, no one's emerged as a reliable pass catcher. Maybe Wan'Dale Robinson asserts himself rest of season as he builds some chemistry with Daniel Jones. But Bellinger has been targeted a lot when he was healthy. He could potentially return later on this season after his, the eye surgery, eye socket?
Correct.
I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, if you're looking for a late season guy, and in the meantime, if you're dumpster diving in a deeper 12, 14 team league, I picked up Tanner Hudson in Smash Except One, and he got, 3 receptions this past week, which not the best, but hey, if again, in deeper leagues, if you're just looking for a stopgap measure, they could get you there.
I'm glad you hit on David Njoku because that's literally, I've traded for him 6 times in the last 2 weeks and pushed it last week. And, this week again, I actually traded Jake Ferguson in 2/3 in one league. I gave up Bellinger and a third in another league. And I'm just like, and a 24-second dead even. And I think in a tight end premium, David Njoku, I know he has the type of injury where it's, he's supposed to be out 4 weeks and they said it might take another 1 to 2, but like, come on, he was the tight end 8. Deshaun Watson coming to town. I think you could easily see him as a top 5 tight end down the stretch. Adam, I know we just listed literally all the tight ends, but anything to add with those or a guy that you're potentially going out there and buying? Because it's just very difficult right now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, 2 that you guys mentioned, I'll just re-highlight Freiermuth. If you are looking to, establish a core tight end for the future, I'm really surprised the market of his, what the market value is with how good he's playing. I mean, he's top 7 tight end. He's super young, and people I just don't think like the offense, given the offensive line, but long term, love it. And then Njoku, I'd agree with that as well. The one guy that if you kind of went over, but I don't think I heard you guys talk about. But for a win now team, I think Higbee is a must buy if you need help because he's not going to cost that much, and he's a top. In scoring, he has tight end top 5 easily within his range of outcomes. He's basically there. He just had one bad week effectively. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, super consistent, and then with Cooper Kupp, who's getting the targets. Especially in the middle of the field. So I think Higbee is a huge buy for contending teams, regardless and especially in tight end premium, if you can put him even in your flex. I have him in Smash 4 in my flex as my second tight end and with Hawkinson, and I'm loving him in that spot.
Very good. Mung, this one I just picked out because I feel like I got to hear what you have to say on this. At FF Dynasty Grill, put out a poll, Kyler Murray or Tua Tagovailoa, who do you want in Dynasty? It's 60-40 Tua right now. Is this more of a what have you done for me lately? Because you spoke last week on, buying Kyler Murray because he was, he's the QB6 at that point. Tua has looked fantastic. Is this an opportunity where we get a little bit added on top? I mean, we got to always find that area to get a little bit on top. And you guys know I've been advocating in April getting Jalen Hurts plus for Kyler Murray and was doing it everywhere. Now, where do we fall in this Kyler Murray Tua Tagovailoa area?
I don't think it's crazy because right now I would rank, Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, and Hurts in a tier together because of their safe floor and just insane upside every week. And then behind that, I still have Herbert and Murray there, both for rushing potential. And Herbert, I believe in the talent. He just hasn't had any help this year. And then right below them, I do have Fields, Tua, Burrow, and Watson. So I think, again, I don't know that Tua's like a true elite talent where he's going to elevate everyone around him like a Mahomes type. But at the same time, I think he's somewhere between Cousins and Garoppolo in terms of, that ability to make the accurate reads. But he's been way better on those downfield throws this year. And, he has Hill and Waddle for the foreseeable future. So, no, I don't think it's crazy to take Tua over Murray. Personally, I still have Murray slightly ahead.
I like it. Adam, I mean, I was talking about that on the pod earlier with John. I'm a little scared of Kyler Murray potentially, having problems with the hamstring down the stretch. What do you think about this particular trade? And I mean, are you making a trade similar to that?
I agree with Mung. I mean, I think Murray. I have Murray higher, but I get it. There's consider. For a contender, I don't think it's crazy if you wanted to make sure you get that upside for the short term. And he is young. He's a year younger, right? He's 24 years old, so there is that as well. Even though at this point of the game, comparison, how long the longevity of QBs these days, it doesn't make a huge bump, but hey, it's notable. So I would agree. I'd lean Murray, but I get it.
Yeah, that's definitely a fun trade. Guys, it's been a fun show. I wanted to go out there. Every now and then we try to just do a show where literally it's the questions you guys are sending in. I mean, we love you guys as a community. We want to, I don't want to say give back, as we get close to the Thanksgiving season, but we are thankful for you guys. Whenever you guys send questions in, I mean, our DMs are open and we're, always willing to answer questions. Guys that are in the Patreon, guys that are volunteering their time and doing things. I mean, there's just been such a great, projection of the community from Smash Accept the whole way across. And it's been a fantastic ride and we absolutely love it. So, I mean, guys, whenever you can send these kind of questions, we try to do these mailbag questions, just like I said, for you guys, but both you guys, we're going to end it on, something you're working on. And then that one guy you're buying, because I keep getting these questions of, Dad, who are you buying this week? And I think we all need to give a little bit of insight of like, who's somebody we're going out there and getting, because I talk to you guys on the regular where I'm going through every roster and I'm like, who am I going to get this week? Like, who's that guy that I think I can start to make some value? And, if you sit back and you're not looking at all the rosters and you're not making trades every week, you're doing yourself a disservice when it comes to Dynasty. So we'll start with you, Adam, first. Thanks again for coming on. We missed you there for a couple of weeks, but tell me what you're working on, what's going on, and one guy that you just got to go out there and buy right now.
Yeah, thanks. On Twitter, it's _Adam Armour, ARMOUR. Thanks, Dad, for having me on. And always a pleasure. But, for, guys I'm buying, I don't, mean to go back to a guy we talked about, but Jameson Williams, in my opinion, is the biggest buy in Dynasty. We've talked about it, so I won't give you reasons, but, just he's out of sight and out of mind. And that's what the type of players, especially in this transition part of the season going into the playoffs, those are the guys you want to snag. So I would say Jameson Williams, and I would say a close second would be for me Marquise Brown. But I just want to throw another name in there as well. And thanks again, Dad.
Yeah, anytime, man. Love it. Mung, same thing. I mean, I know you got a lot of stuff going on. Who's a buy for you? And tell everybody what's going on in your world.
Yeah, I'll have yet another Dynasty rankings update out fairly soon. We know that these rankings are constantly changing, so I try to stay as up to date as possible. And, you guys can find that over at fantraxhq.com. And you can find me on Twitter at FFA_Mung. That's MENG. And then, we always give that bonus content right at the end, right? For the people who stick through the entire podcast And I would say that we always talk about buying low on players, selling high on players, and getting that value. But an underrated aspect of dynasty management is knowing when to potentially buy high, right? Which players are worth that draft capital and are worth the valuations that seem preposterous at first, right? We saw Patrick Mahomes' meteoric rise. People weren't fully buying into him early on in that season. And I think that's somewhat true with Justin Fields still, right? People are saying, oh, well, he beat up on Miami and he beat up on Detroit, one of the worst defenses in the league. And now he's got Atlanta. So I'm sure there will be some calls to potentially sell high after this week. But, the trajectory that I think we're seeing Fields on reminds me a lot of Lamar Jackson, where it was mostly the rushing at first. We're seeing some terrible reads or terrible decisions, at least, throwing some bad interceptions, but real development as a passer too. And when you're looking at what he's accomplishing with the lack of talent around him, I think that he could solidify himself in that top tier of fantasy quarterbacks. And one of the very top picks in Superflex startups pretty soon. And right now, you can probably still get him for just one early 2023 first, when people are still looking at Stroud and Young, and you wish that they will become what Fields has already demonstrated these last few games. So I think he's a buy high. And then, just a tiny bonus, I would sell high on Cole Kmet, though, even though he's linked to Fields. What is it, like 5 touchdowns in the last 3 games on just like 10 or 11 catches. So as good as Fields has been, Kmet remains a sell high for me.
I love what you're saying about Fields. The big takeaway I had last week was saying that I think he's going to jump into that second tier of quarterbacks by the end of the season, and most people already have him as a top 8 to 10 quarterback. That's a great one. I'm going to keep pushing because I've been buying him so cheap. Pair of thirds here and there for Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson is the guy that they wanted to bring in there to Miami at the trade deadline. He comes out in his first game, puts up 26 fantasy points, and I think all that guy does is at this time of year win people championships when he gets an opportunity. We were talking about the tight ends. Another guy that's cheap with Darren Waller on the IR. The only true tight end handcuff there is Foster Moreau. He's had 2 tight end 1 weeks out of the last 3 weeks. This past week, tight end 6 overall. There's a definite potential that Darren Waller doesn't come back at least for the next 4 weeks. It might even be longer because the Raiders are in a position where do they need to rush him back? They don't necessarily have to. And he's always a guy that you can get out there cheap and puts up production every single week. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and enjoy the process.